Bruce Academy. And they were each assigned.
Everything's A-OK. Roger Wilson, we hang out. 10-4, good buddy.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boris Wiseman, and on behalf of the Hill Student Society, the Maple Leaf Lodge of B'nai B'rith, the Association of Survivors of Nazi Oppression, and the Holocaust Committee of the Canadian Jewish Congress, let me welcome you to this evening with Simon Wiesenthal. Robert J. Lifton, the Yale psychiatrist, has written that survivors of Nazi death camps are collectors of justice. He has said that they seek something beyond economic or social restitution, something closer to acknowledgement of crimes committed against them and punishment of those responsible, in order to reestablish at least the semblance of a moral universe. Their feelings can, of course, include hunger for revenge. But, he writes, I think the more fundamental impulse is toward a reconstruction of meaning and toward a sense of justice. It can truly be said that our guest tonight is just such a collector of justice. Simon Wiesenthal spent 4 years in concentration camps, 12 camps in all. He began gathering and preparing evidence on Nazi atrocities for the War Crimes Section of the United States Army. When his association with the U.S. Army ended in 1947, he, along with 30 volunteers, opened the Jewish Historical Documentation Center in Linz, Austria, for the purpose of assembling evidence for future trials. Though the center was forced to close in 1954, Mr. Wiesenthal singularly continued his hunt for war criminals. After years of searching, the hunt culminated in the arrest of Adolf Eichmann in 1959. Encouraged by this success, Mr. Wiesenthal reopened his documentation center, this time in Vienna, and has continued in his hunt for Nazi war criminals to this day. In the past 30 years, Simon Wiesenthal has been responsible for the court trials of 1,100 Nazis. On May 23, 1960, the day Israel announced it had abducted Adolf Eichmann, Simon Wiesenthal received a cable from Jerusalem. It read, "Congratulations on your excellent work." He handed it to his daughter and said, "You never saw your father when you were a baby. You were asleep when I went out in the morning looking for this man, and you were asleep by the time I came home. I don't know how long I will live. I don't know if I will leave you any fortune. But this cable is my gift to you, because through this cable, I am now a part of history. It is in this historic legacy that we are privileged to share in tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Simon Wiesenthal."
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, my dear young friends. First, I must apologize for my very bad English. I had no time to perfect it. Through my work, I must speak many languages, read documents in many languages, and speak with people. But I hope you will understand me. I must first correct the picture about me. I am not a Jewish James Bond. I am not a Don Quixote, and I am not between. Because my office is a wanted office, I think I need to give first a little wanted list about me. I born 68 years ago in a little town in Galicia, Buchurch. When I was born, this was Austria. Later, this was Ukraine. Later, this was Poland. Later, this was again Ukraine. Later, this was Poland. Later, this was Soviet Union. Then again Poland. Then again Soviet Union. Then we was occupied by the Nazis. Today, this is also Soviet Union. In my lifetime, I was 8 times liberated, and I hope this was the last liberation. But this is a typical European history. I am very proud of a few inhabitants of my town. The only Israeli Nobel Prize winner, Shaya Agnon, is from our town. And also the parents of Professor Sigmund Freud are coming from my town. By the way, this is the family of my wife. Living under such circumstances with so many liberations, I had long before Hitler my own experience with anti-Semitism, with the anti-Semites, with the Polish anti-Semites, with the Russian anti-Semites, with the Ukrainian anti-Semites. And this was a very good preparation for the later time. I could not study in Poland because we had, and this is maybe nice for you to know, the numerus clausus. We were only 10% of the population in Poland, and only 10% of the Jews had the possibility to study. But was a few faculties that we have numerus nullus, medicine and architecture. And because I decided to study architecture, I went to Prague in Czechoslovakia, later come back for the Nazification. I was working 12 years as an engineer, built houses, between them 2 years in Soviet Union. And one day I had a talk in Odessa. This was before the war, but in the time of Hitler. And I find out something new for me, because we are people from the West, and there was the Iron Curtain at that time. And the father of my director in Odessa, old Jew, when I tell him what we know about Hitler, he tells me what he knows, what's going on in Soviet Union. And he say, you know, the world is round. When you go right, you become left. This what happened to me in Soviet Union at that time. One day I was called to the KGB. At that time, this was the name, NKVD. 48 hours, they examined me only about one word. And later they released me, say nothing. And the time, I come right in the time back to Lvov, a few days before the beginning of the war, of the German-Soviet war. I was in ghetto, later in a lot of concentration camps. I was liberated, my last liberation, on the 5th of May, 1945, in Mauthausen in Austria. My weight was 90 pounds. During this cruel period, I lost all my relatives and also my wife, whom I find after the war, a few months after the war, by a miracle. I found after the war a few relatives in the United States, but she has no relatives all in the world. After the liberation in Mauthausen, we had a war crimes group in the camp from the 65th Division. They liberate us. And I came in contact with this group, and now I saw something is going on in the matter of the justice. We was in Mauthausen people from 22 nations. The majority of them was going back to their homes. But for me to go back, Poland was for me a cemetery. I have no people in the world at that time, I don't know that my wife is alive, for whom I can live. So I decided to live for the dead. I remember my first talk with my future superior at that time. This was a professor of the Harvard Law School, an American captain. He asked me about my profession. I say, I'm an architect. He say, okay, we will send you first to a sanitary, and later you go home, you will build houses, make a life, and so. I say, build houses for whom? For people like we don't need houses. Because we lost not only houses and families, we lost not only the property, all material goods, we lost every believing in humanity, in friendship, and in justice. And without these components, you have not the right to live. You have not the right to build a family, to have children. So, a few days later, I was going every day, ask them, took me. I remember my first case. I was at that time maybe 100 or 110 pounds was my weight. And we are going with two people from the military police by a jeep to arrest a Nazi, not a big shot. And before his house, and this was a house of 3 floors, and for me at that time 3 floors, this was with my weight. And before the house was 2 nice girls. These 2 from the military police was immediately occupied by the girls. And they tell me, bring him down. So I walk the 3 floors, knocked on the door, nobody opened the door. The man said so. Because this was the big shock in the days after the liberation. They were sure we will do with them the same what they do with the Jews. I came to him, asked the name, Friedrich Schulz, Unterscharführer, have you web? Nothing. I say, you are arrested. Okay, walk with me. And now go down, for me impossible. You can imagine the situation, a man whom I arrested, he brings me down. I will tell you another example to know what was at that time, what was our feeling as the Jews, and was also the feeling of the population. After 3 months, when I was working with war crimes, later with the Office of Strategic Service, and later I was transferred to the Counterintelligence Corps, there was about 15 local people. I was the only Jew. The others was formerly policemen, people they was released because they were socialist or their families was anti-Nazi. I became a visitor from United States, a supervisor, a certain Mr. Parker, I don't know, it was a real name or not, from Oklahoma, who was during the war in Hawaii. And this man came to teach us to catch Nazis. This was so funny. He had a list of all Nazi organizations, SR, SS, and so, and tell us this is bad, this is bad, this is bad. And the people from the police, people, skilled people, with a routine, he asked them what you mean, what we must do, and they give routine answers. I become very, very nervous to saw all this and to see the bureaucracy in this. And when he came to me and I was so in the middle, we look, the name, Mr. Wiesenthal, he say, what you mean? And I say, we are doing all wrong. I say, wrong? Why? I say, because we are searching for guilty people. I say, we must search for guilty people. I say, no. We must search for innocent people. We will have not so much to do. You must understand, for me at that time, not only the Nazis was guilty, the whole world was guilty. All this, they kill us, and the other people, they keep silent and they know what's going on. This was our thinking at that time as Jews. And now, what was the thinking of the other side? The Nazis and the Germans and the Austrians, they was indoctrinated by the Nazi propaganda, and they know that the Jews were the enemies number one of Hitler, because this was the 7 or 12 years propaganda. And because Hitler lost the war, in their opinion at that time, the Jews are the victors number one. And whom you meet from the Germans or Austrians, he began to tell you he was an anti-Nazi, he saved the lives of Jews, he had a Jewish grandmother, and so and so. For me at that time, this was the biggest secret. How was possible to Hitler to have a party with 10 million enemies? Because if you had made an account about all this, what people say you have only such people. And my work for the, give me a little water. For these American organizations, I had no working time. I'm coming at 7 o'clock in the morning, and late in the evening, I'm going back. I had a net with informers, and every day I bring so many information more than the other people. My superior and the others was very content with me. And for me, this was all like a divine service. I refused to take even a cigarette from them because, no, this is holy, and this is against the spirit of this work to take something. And so 1 year was going on with the Americans. I arrest somebody, the next day he was free, because one of the guys of our office made the acquaintance of his wife or his daughter. The next day he was free. Was the story with the fraternization, and I feel this will be in the future not so good. But I had no possibility for another work. And then one day, after I bring a group of a packet of documents that I find, my superior say, Simon, you know, you must emigrate to United States. You become a big shot. I say, why? He say, no, the red light and the green light is regulating in our country the traffic. All other is regulated by the Jews. I say, what you say? Repeat it. He repeated. And at that moment, I feel that the matter of justice for these millions, they was killed under such cruel circumstances is not in good hands. Even a harmless joke is made by an officer of the army who liberated us. And I say, you know, I will tell you something. Up tomorrow, look for a substitute. This was the birthday of the Jewish Documentation Center. With 30 survivors, desperados like I, singles, without families, I built the Jewish Documentation Center without money, without a permission. We was all living in displaced person camp. We had from the UNRWA, later from the IRO, food, clothing, place to live. And I met one of my old acquaintances, a formerly parliament member from Poland, and he was now in Switzerland. He gave me $50 monthly. And this was enough, because we are all working without any salary. And this was only for meal expenses. At that time, $50 was like today, 500, I think. And I began to build this Jewish Documentation Center like a house from the ground. At that time, we had in Europe maybe 100 displaced person camps in Germany, in Austria, and Italy. And I sent people and established correspondence in every camp. And they had, they spoke with the people and made depositions, and especially with the name of all these they commit crimes. After 6 months, we had a list of 1,000 places in Europe, and all these places crimes was committed, and we had the witnesses. We print such list, send the list to all governments, and become a factor. I was invited to Nuremberg to study documents. Polish, Hungarian, Russians, French, Belgium government sent us letters. We had a correspondence like a state organization. No one asked us, who are you, who give you the right? Because all know we had the right to do as the Jews. And all was going well to the one moment, to the beginning of the Cold War. In August 48 began the Cold War. And all was dropped. All cases they are before the Allied courts was dropped. A lot of Nazis, they was convicted, was released on a parole. I was at that day, a day of the beginning, in Nuremberg, and was studying documents. And I say, this is, people is coming and pack this and pack the others. I asked Mr. Niebergall, Major Niebergall, what is going on? He said, we are moving all to Alexandria and Washington. I say, why? They say, you are crazy, you live on the moon? When Uncle Joe, they call Stalin, will say, Avanti, there will be with the criminals in Siberia. In the time of the Cold War, since 48 to 60, in this 12 years, we had a close season for murderers. Nothing happened. When we are looking today on the time on this 12 years of the Cold War, we know the Cold War has no winners. East and West lost the Cold War. They lost people, money, prestige. The only winners of the Cold War was the Nazi criminals. At that time, they escaped from Europe with the help of a lot of underground movements to Italy, and from Italy to South America, to South Africa, to Spain, to Near East. And after the Eichmann case, the hall was reopened. In '54, I closed the document center because at that time this was really to be a Don Quixote, to do something. 28 of my friends, they was work with me, emigrated. A part of them are today in Canada. And I closed the document center and sent all the documents, about 1,200 pounds, to Yad Vashem, to Israel, and keep only one file with me, and this was the Eichmann dossier, because by accident, the house of the family Eichmann was 2 blocks from our office in Linz. His father's name also Adolf Eichmann, and 4 times in a day when I'm going to document center and back, I'm going behind Adolf Eichmann. I find Adolf Eichmann in '54 in Argentina through a stamp collector. Because at the time, about in '48, I became sick because I could not sleep. And all what was going on during the day, all the positions of the witnesses, I took with me not only all what happened to me, but also what happened to the others. And he recommended me as a hobby and give me about 10 or 12 different hobbies. And so I bought stamps because this was from all these hobbies that he recommended me as more intelligent. And where I could not sleep, but I had not so much money at that time to buy stamps, but I sit with the same stamps, look on this, and after 2 hours I could sleep. And then one day, I was on a stamp exhibition in '54 in Innsbruck, and met an acquaintance from an old baron, and he has a very nice collection. He invited me to look on the collection. On my card, he saw that I am an engineer, and he asked me about buildings, and so I say, I know that he, as a monarchist, his family was arrested. And I say, I am not working as an engineer, but I'm doing this and this business. I say, just a moment, I think I have something for you. I have a friend from the army with whom I changed stamps from Argentina, and in one of the letters was something, maybe this interests you. So I went and looked for the letter and give me the letter, and I saw, you asked me for acquaintances. Major Schulz are here from the 63 division, and another man from this division, and so. And you can imagine, I met twice this swine Eichmann, who has to do with the Jews, an acquaintance of me, spoke with him. He lives in the vicinity in Buenos Aires and work for a waterworks, and so. He said, this is interesting for you? I say, no, not so much. After a while, I say, could you use your toilet and go to the toilet and make the whole description what I know, and so on. And then I make a report for Israel and for United States to Mr. Nahum Goldman, and say, look, this is not a report of an agent whom we pay money. This is a true information, because this is only by the way. So. And from the Jewish World Congress, I receive a letter from a certain Rabbi Kalmanowitz, he needs the accurate address of Eichmann. And from Israel, I receive also information. This cannot be true because on the basis of, I don't know, remember more man from the FBI, the American agents saw Eichmann in Damascus in Syria. I asked the Jewish World Congress for $500 to send somebody. I was sure this baron will give me a recommendation, so I received an answer, we have no money. This was after a search of 10 years, because at that time was all, not the majority of the activities against Eichmann was in my hands. And Dr. Kempner, the deputy prosecutor in Nuremberg, he remembers me when I came 45 to him and find in the archives the personal acts of Eichmann. In 54, I say I closed the document center and began to work for refugees, because for me, the problem of the refugees was also a consequence of all this what happened during the war. Now was coming the Hungarian Revolution, and I began to work to skill people for new professions, because a bookkeeper cannot emigrate. It's not a profession if you don't know the language and so. And we skilled 8,000 people from several nations for emigration. In 59, came to me Israeli agents, because they receive now from other places also information about the stay of Eichmann in Argentina, and the new search began, and end in May 60 when they arrest Eichmann. I would say the Eichmann affair is a big mosaic. Many people give the stones for this mosaic. The majority, one don't know the other. And no one can say that he alone is responsible for the arrest of Eichmann. But the importance of the arrest of Eichmann is a big importance, not because he was later executed, only because we had this big historical lecture through the Eichmann trial. Eichmann was condemned to death in Nuremberg in 47, between many, many trials. And at that time, only in the first 10 cases of the people, they are members of the German government. The Germans and Austria was interested in these cases. Later, all other cases, all other trials had no audience. People had not to eat, people had no houses. It was families, a part of the family in this part, and other part people was traveling from place to place. And people know, oh, okay. Even the Jews say, okay, all is going in order. But at that time, we had find Eichmann, had execute him in 47. It will be impossible later as such a risorgimento of all this, a repetition. But the Eichmann trial, 15 years later, had a new audience. And this audience was hundreds of millions of newspaper readers in all the world. And in this 15 years was so many books published. And we had pictures, we had in newspapers, and people was in better economic conditions and could be occupied with these problems. And this public opinion from all the world pressed the Germans and the Austrians, now we must go again on with all these problems. I reopened, after the Eichmann trial, my office in Vienna, with only a few collaborators, and we had immediate success on the basis of documents. I find people from Eichmann staff, and it is going well only a few years up to the moment when all this became, you know, a view in the politics. I need to give you a number because this is important. Many people, when they hear today the search for Nazis and Nazi crimes, they say, why? We have now other problems. The Nazis, they are old, they are sick, they have any importance. Only a small number of Nazis are in Germany and Austria. This is nothing. This is a biological problem in 2-3 years. From all this, it's only true that we have other problems too. The Nazi Party had 10 million members. And because they depend on the young generation, is an average Nazi today between 55 and 60 years old. And this is not the age, I am 68. And because the Nazis, the party members, was not on the front, but in the majority in Germany, in the occupied territories, today are 7 million Nazis alive. 5 million in West Germany, 1.5 million in East Germany, 300,000 in Austria, and 200,000 all over the world in round figures. In my country, in Austria, we have 2 big political parties. It's impossible to get a majority without the votes of the Nazis. No Austrian president can be elected without the help of the Nazi votes because we have 2 candidates and the votes of one party is not enough. And also in Germany, they infiltrated all political parties and had an influence. And the party managers must pay when they wish to have Nazi votes. And the price is very cheap when you can pay with Jewish corpses. From this point of view, we know today we will no more have trials in Austria. And the 7 years from the beginning of the government of Kreisky, we had only 9 trials with 7 acquittals. And they say open, our juries are against these trials, and we are a tourist country, the acquittals are against our prestige. And the matter of justice is another matter. In Germany, we will have trials to the year 85 or 86. This is a different character. You must know. After the war, the Germans know that they must buy a ticket to come into the family of the nations. This ticket was material and moral restitution. The Austrians become this ticket automatically because they was, as a country, the first victim of the Nazi aggression. And they ignored the fact that through historic accidents, the Austrians, there was only 8.5% of the population of the Greater Germany, are a few times more responsible for the crimes. Not only because Hitler was an Austrian, Kaltenbrunner was an Austrian, Seyss-Inquart was an Austrian, but through a such accident that Eichmann came with his family to Linz as a 4-year-old child. And later, when he built his staff for the final solution, 70% Austrians was the members of his staff. And when Globocnik ordered that, when Himmler ordered Globocnik, the Gauleiter of Vienna, to be the chief of the extermination in Poland, and with these 3 camps, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor, his staff was 65 Austrians, mostly Carinthians. Many people ask me why you have the office in Vienna, and this is my response. In the time when we was working before the Cold War, I had many times visitors. Was coming Jewish partisans, was 46, 47, even 48, and they had talks with me. Simon, why wait for trials? We was fighting against the Nazis in the woods, in Russia, in Hungary, in Yugoslavia. Give us the addresses. They kill our families. Why wait for trials? Give us the addresses. We'll bring it in order. And I say, how many people we can kill? 6, 60, 600. It's the biggest figure. What will happen? Will happen a balance. People will say, yes, the Jews are right to do it because they kill so many Jews. And so all will be in order. The Nazis kill Jews, the Jews kill Nazis. No problem more. From one side, maximum 600, from the other side, 6 million. And I refuse to give addresses. Last month in January, I was in Israel and met one of these people from the resistance group. And he reminds me that I refuse him to give the name of a man who is responsible for the death of his family. And this man was later acquitted in Austria. And he tells me, you see, Simon, you are responsible that this man is alive. I say, look, when we was going on 45 and later after the war to rebuild justice, the moral side of the Holocaust was on our side. And this is not a matter if 1 or 10 or 5,000 Nazis are alive. Because our account, not only with the Nazis, but also with the world, must stay as an open account. Now, after 32 years, I think it's time to speak a little, to make a resume, what was good, what was bad. Maybe we must stop and close this chapter or go on. The first big handicap against our efforts was a false term, was a false description. This was the description of war criminal. This description was an invention of Goebbels in 1941, adopted by the Allies in 1943, and later adopted also by many of us. The crimes of the Nazis have only a very little to do with the war. Every war is a crime. But the Nazi crimes began 6 years before the war. The establishment of the concentration camp, the Nuremberg Law, the Crystal Night, all this mass murdering of groups of political enemies, this was long before the war. and also during the war, the mass executions took place and the extermination camps was in places, there was in a distance between 700 and 1100 miles from the front. This has nothing to do with the war. The war makes only possible to commit these crimes in a such big capacity. I will give you an example. In May 43, the Germans arrested about 720 or 730 Jews on the Greek island Rhodos. They shipped them to Saloniki, and they transported them 2 weeks through the whole Europe to Treblinka, and a half of them was coming dead to kill them. Had such crime something to do with the war? This is only a diminution when we call these crimes war crimes. Was also really war crimes from both sides. But this extermination of millions of people by an industrial principle has nothing to do with the war. And we have another difficulty. When we call it war crimes, we make from the criminals soldiers. And they was not soldiers. They were shirkers in uniform. Their fight was a fight without any risk. And through this, 90% of the criminals survived the war. We have another difficulty, and this is the law. I don't know how old is the criminal codex, the penal codex, in your country, in Canada. In Europe, the penal codex are about 100 years old. I mean, this will be here also. Who was at that time when this codex was created a mass murderer? Generally, a lunatic, a sick man, a man who was too early released from an asylum, a man who ran amok and on the street killed a few people, or another in effect, he killed his family, his parents-in-law. Against that people, we had our law. And also another thing. The criminal saw the victim, and the victim saw him. Between them was a relation, a hatred, or the human feeling. But our time, the Nazi period, brings us a new type of a criminal was not known before. A criminal from the desk. With one telephone call, or with a cable, he killed in a distance of few hundred kilometers, 10,000, 20,000 people. He don't saw the victims. The victims don't know who ordered it. They are dead. But against this type of the criminals, we have only our old law. In my profession as an architect, I feel an example. This law against such criminals is like police building regulations against an earthquake. Now, when we have a trial, when the sentence for such criminal is a life sentence or death sentence, we can say he paid with his life for the crime. But if we have a limited sentence, only a few years, the picture changed. I will give you an example. It was also one of my cases. The transport officer of Eichmann, Franz Nowak, also an Austrian, had 3 trials. 2 times he was acquitted. The 3rd time, the sentence was 9 years. What was the crime? He transported 1,700,000 people to Auschwitz. You don't need a computer to find out This is a half minute per victim. People say, you are crazy, a half minute per victim. Yes, a half minute per victim. And now people say, oh, this is wrong. And the spirit of the law is to punish adequately. On one side the crime, for the other side the sentence. But when you cannot punish adequately, why punish at all? For people, they say it, I have also answer. But this is the same answer I give to me. The life of all these criminals has any importance. We are living in a world they forget very quick. Our parents was not preparing us. I remember when I was a young man, like many of you, in the 20s, we smile about Hitler, and our parents made very nice Jewish jokes about Hitler. And our philosophers say, this is impossible, that such man in Germany, in a country of philosophers, of thinkers, of inventors, of professors. No, this is only for a little time because they lost the war and they are so worried. It's impossible. This program, who will recognize this program? And later, when he come to the power, our parents say, you know, go in the kitchen, you cook very hard, but you not eat hard. And we were surprised. And this is our duty. We cannot say our parents was guilty. Our parents had no experience, but we have experience. And nobody knows what happened 30 years ago cannot happen again. Who can assure us? The history of man is a history of crimes. They are assimilated to the time. If you pardon one Holocaust, you open the door for the next. We have families, we have children, we have grandchildren. Our duty, our responsibility is bigger than from our parents. There's any experience, but we have it. And from this point of view, is for me a trial more important than a sentence. For us is enough when the judges of his nation, of the nation of the criminals, find him guilty. Guilty or not guilty. For us is also important the protests against an acquittal. And people say it's not all in order, we must make a protest. Let us speak about another difficulty. And for this difficulty, we Jews are alone responsible. Since the beginning of my work, I was always speaking about 11 million non-military persons, civilians, they was killed by the Nazis. Between them, I say, was 6 million Jews. The other 5 millions, there was Russians, there was Poles, there was Serbs, Gypsies, Dutchmen, and the others. Many times on conferences, I remember I had a big quarrel with some Jewish people from the leadership in 1948 in Montreal, not to speak only about the 6 million Jews. We must speak about the 11 millions. But it was impossible. I know people say our losses are the biggest. But believe me, I am the vice president of the International Resistance Movement. We are 60 organizations in 11 countries. Only 15,000 Jews between them. We lost many, many friends through this, our propaganda. Only about the 6 million Jews. There's not only this. People in Holland say, why not mention us? Young people say, our parents was killed in Auschwitz because they protect Jews. And we had so many about this. And we need these people, all this, from all these 22 nations they was in the oppression, for a common fight against the anti-Semitism, against neo-Nazism, against all sorts of dictatorship, and also as friend of Israel. But we are speaking only about the 6 million Jews, and we are responsible that the whole problem was reduced to a problem between Nazis and Jews. This is our guilty. And when you are coming in some place and spoke about a mass grave, people say, aha, the Jews. Why not the Serbs? Why not the others? And you see another thing. The Nazis and the neo-Nazis never fight against the figure of 11 million. Never. This figure is recognized by all. They don't speak about this. They fight only against the figure of the 6 millions. Because this is easier to fight them. We have not accurate figures, the 6 millions. And our statistics going on between 5,800,000 and 6,200,000. So we take the figure in the middle. Now, I must speak also about the number of the people they commit crimes. 11 million people cannot be killed by a few dozen. And the number is not known accurate. Since years, I have talks with the General Prosecutor's Office in Germany, and so we decided a round figure from about 150,000 people, they commit crimes. How many people become trials after the war? About 30,000. And so you have these two figures. 150,000 from one side, 30,000 from the other side. This become a picture of an iceberg. 1/6 is known, 5/6 are dark. And we know it will be impossible to find all these people. It will be impossible because we lost 11 million witnesses and maybe millions of German documents was destroyed. And when we make an account of all these difficulties and spoke to wise people, they will say, look, you alone speak for this, not to do more. The term of war crimes is bad, the law is bad. Through the propaganda about the 6 million Jews, you have not so much friends between the other nations. And now also this story with the thousands and maybe 120,000 of people that we could not find. And the time is running. In 1979 will begin the statute of limitations in Germany. But during the whole period after the war, was so many done with the justice, with the prosecutors, that we have approximately 95% of all names. We have difficulties. And I will give an example. We know all that in Auschwitz was killed between 2.5 and 3 million people. 6,000 SS men was in Auschwitz during the period of 4 years. Not all together. Normally it was between 1,200 and 1,400. They was changed, go to other camp for other camp here. From the 6,000, we know by name, only by name, 950. Personal data, we have from 650. And witnesses, we had against 220. You see, like this extermination machinery was working. And in their favor, from 6,000, we have only 220. But we have a new generation, our Jewish generation, and the generation of other nations. Nobody knows, maybe the murderers of tomorrow are born today. It is not an obligation that the future victims of a Holocaust must be Jews. Not an obligation. We know from the history, and after the war was also a Holocaust in Biafra, and Biafra was not Jews. There was many crimes in other places. But how long our generation are alive? The generation of the survivors and the generation, the German and Austrian generation from whom this all criminals was coming, this problem must stay as an open problem between us up to a biological solution. At the end, I remember, and this was for me very, very important, an accident. And many times when I was in a very bitter situation, was impossible to arrest people, or we had possibilities, we had no money, because people say, we must give money for other purposes. And this is one accident. And for me, this is a leading accident. This was in the year 46. And one day was coming to me two rabbis. It tells me they have an information that in a castle in Carinthia are a Jewish library. And somebody from the city of Graz tell them he was in the castle and saw thousands of Jewish prior books and maybe other books. I know at that moment why these old books was there, because in the time when the Nazis was planning to exterminate all Jews, they was planning also for a big museum about the Jews, because after the war, no one Jew will be alive, and when somebody will know something about the Jews, he must go to the museum. The next Sunday, I took a car, and with these two rabbis and with two other people, we went to this castle. We come in, and the man who was responsible for this gave us the possibility to come in the cellar, and we saw thousands and thousands of these Jewish books, prior books, old prior books, a sort of new prior books. And in one moment, I heard somebody felt. I looked, this was one rabbi. I took him, gave him water, and he had in his hand a prior book, and say, this is for my home. Look, he could not speak, look on the inscription. The other rabbi read for us the inscription. If somebody will find this book, give it to my brother.